Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from Free State, Colorado, and I hope you're doing well. I want to look at some survey data, some polling information to see if we can answer this question. Can Republicans win a statewide race in Colorado? I know a lot of people are skeptical of that claim. A lot of people don't think it's possible, but we'll see what the polls show. And you may have seen this headline, this article, which has been floating around social media. I first saw it at completecolorado.com, a website you should be checking every day, from Forbes.com, saying new polls suggest blue state Colorado in play for Republicans. Definitely exciting for a lot of people and shows that things may be changing here in our great state. This was published just recently on October 5th, 2025. I'll read a couple excerpts here before we dig in further. A recent Denver Post report on the state of affairs in Colorado affirmed what Democrats have seen nationally, that their brand is struggling. Another recent Quinnipiac University poll affirmed the same. The Democrat Party is deeply unpopular nationwide, and blue Colorado isn't immune from the same trend. Quote, the strength of Republicans' identification with working class issues is a warning shot for a party that's lost ground across the country, end quote, reported the left leaning Denver Post in a September 16th feature. Blue Colorado has seen a dramatic political shift, rejecting Democrat policies, suggesting the longtime blue state may be in play for Republicans for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Wow. Totally true there. I think some of the policies that the Democratic majority in our state legislature have been pushing these last year, 2 years, longer than that even, have really hurt working class people across Colorado. Employers have fled the state. Regulations have crushed small businesses. And of course, the permanent taxation of overtime wages here in Colorado, as opposed to what they're doing at the federal level, is an absolute shame and should rile up anybody who makes overtime in Colorado for sure. Getting back to the article. In a poll conducted 2 weeks ago by On Message, a Beltway based Republican survey firm, a vast majority of Colorado Republicans and independents, probably mean unaffiliateds here, comprising 2/3 of all voters, think that the state is headed in the wrong direction. Well, that is the case. Couple that with 1/3 of Democrats sharing the same view, and you have a recipe for a political upset. Wow. For On Message's veteran pollster Wes Anderson, Colorado is setting up for a seismic political shift. Quote, what's clear from all results is that Coloradans are not happy with the party in power. So much so that flipping the state red is now conceivable, especially given the weakness of the Democrat Party and their declared candidates for governor. Weakness and Michael Bennett definitely go along in the same sentence there. And Phil Weiser is just so far in left field that I think a lot of Coloradans would just be like, oh my gosh, this guy has no place there. But yes, Bennett likely supposedly to win here. What's interesting in this article, and of course I'll have all these articles at freestatecolorado.com. You can dig into them, read them if you'd like. But they talk about George Brockler, who is not declared for governor at all. But this Republican strategy group, this new poll out there, thinks that he's a great candidate here. So let's get back to it. Quote, Bennett is seen as part of the problem, end quote, says Chris Cox of DC-based Cap 6 Advisors, a Republican strategy firm. Quote, he's tied it to the open borders disaster, soaring fentanyl death rates that are especially high in Colorado, and the state's overall crime rates that far exceed the national average, and that are directly linked to the flow of criminal elements crossing the southern border into Colorado because of the state's Democrat-led sanctuary policies, end quote. Definitely, we have outrageous crime, unacceptable levels of crime, car theft, other issues that really hopefully will motivate voters to change things because we cannot continue this way. The poll also revealed that crime has emerged as a key issue for voters in urban and suburban Denver. Just get on nextdoor.com and you'll see the talk about crime, that's for sure. A city that now ranks in the top 10 most dangerous cities in America, gosh, and where the auto theft rate is the second highest in the country, behind only Bakersfield, California. Yikes. On the Republican side, however, the poll revealed that of the declared and likely candidates, only longtime District Attorney George Brockler stands a viable chance of pulling off one of the nation's biggest political upsets in 2026. That is so interesting. First time I've heard that. Of course, Brockler's been around for a long time. He's run for statewide office previously, and He could be considered a favorite if he jumps in the race. So we'll see. So very interesting stuff there. But let's keep going through some of these articles here. I did want to link to that Quinnipiac University poll to really point out what they were saying there in that Forbes article. But this is kind of the key point, I think. Democrat and Republican parties. So this is nationwide. This is a nationwide poll here. 30% of voters have a favorable opinion of the Democrat Party, while 54% have an unfavorable opinion and 10% haven't heard enough about it. This is the lowest favorability rating for the Democratic Party since the Quinnipiac University poll began asking voters this question in 2008. The previous low was in January of this year when 31% of voters had a favorable opinion, 50% had an unfavorable opinion, and 9% hadn't heard enough about it. In today's poll, 38% of voters have a favorable opinion of the Republican Party. So a little bit higher, 38 as opposed to 30%, while 51% have an unfavorable opinion, a little bit less, and 7% haven't heard enough about it. So very interesting stuff. The Democratic brand. I think part of it is how far left they've gone, the justification for the violence that we're seeing, the rioting, this horrible behavior. I mean, it doesn't do the Democrats any good to be associated with all of that. And hopefully here in Colorado, voters are waking up. So this is from the Denver Post. This is a September 8th article that one of the articles that was referenced in that Forbes piece. You can definitely read it here at freestatecolorado.com. I'll have everything linked. Colorado voters curdle on top Democrats, including Governor Polis and U.S. senators, amid party slide. Definitely. I mean, it is kind of a good thing to see that Jared Polis is finally getting his due in terms of voters rejecting his out of control policies, his restrictions on our rights. And Bennett there, oh my gosh. Here's the other article at the Denver Post. Colorado voters are dissatisfied with Democrats. Polis, Hickenlooper, and Bennett can't hide. This editorial. Now, of course, this is an editorial from the Denver Post editorial board, which is very, in my opinion at least, very left leaning, very Democrat supporting. So they kind of try and give some advice to the Democratic Party, which is pretty interesting, I think. And we're going to jump over to that poll. So we're not going to look at that here. But interesting to see what the Denver Post conclusions are. And I think no matter who you are, Republican, Democrat, unaffiliated, third party, libertarian, if you're running for office, these are important lessons to learn. Democrats will win safe seats in 2026 with their heads in the sand. But if the party wants to gain ground in swing districts, its politicians are going to have to step up to the challenge at hand, restoring faith in and favorability of the party. Can that be done without rehashing the many missteps of the past 4 years? We would like to see elected officials be accountable and transparent. Well, when you talk about accountability, of course, I can't help but think of Jenna Griswold. Uh, massive levels of bad behavior that have not been held accountable. And of course, the lack of transparency from our government in general. But Colorado must move forward, as must the nation. If Democrats want to stop losing ground, they've got to appeal to voters as far more than an alternative to Trump. And I think that's interesting too, because everything they're doing is talking about how bad Trump is, how bad the Republicans are, but not really talking about any of the benefits that their party provides, or their philosophy, or their principles. I mean, it might be obvious that their philosophies and principles don't really provide a lot of benefits for the people of Colorado, the average normal working class person. But nonetheless, if you're a Republican running for office or anybody running for office, you got to really present yourself in a way of what is your benefit to the community? Why should people vote for you? What are you going to bring? It's not enough just to talk about the negatives of your opponent, but the positives of yourself. And I think that's an important lesson, why I wanted to talk about that. Now, my friend over at the New Republican Colorado on X, definitely follow him if you're not. He does some great reporting, especially on a lot of the Denver stuff. But this is the most recent Colorado Secretary of State data. Democrats and Republicans met expectations last month. The big surprise, the No Labels Party had a strong performance in September. So that's very interesting here. So this is a post he did on October 7th, 2025. And the screenshot here is the Colorado active registration changes September 2025. So this is from registered voters here in Colorado from September 1st, 2025 to October 1st, 2025, and seeing the change. So in the 1 month period, Democrats in Colorado lost 2,300 voters. Wow, 2,300 voters left the Democratic Party. The Republican side, only 758 joined or went to the Republican Party side out of all voters. This isn't just the Democrats who left their party, but anybody who just moved to Colorado, newly registered, maybe somebody just turned 18, something along those lines. But only 758 So even though there's a lot of skepticism and a lot of negative thoughts towards the Democrat Party, the Republican Party is not really getting a lot of traction either. And if not too surprising if you've been paying attention to Colorado politics. Interesting to see the No Labels Party. I don't know a lot about them, don't know so much about what they're doing, but interesting to see them pick up 600 votes. Not a ton, and they still only have 28,000 votes or voters total registered with their party statewide. But we see that gap between the Democrat and Republican Party thinning down a little bit, shortening that gap. And then unaffiliated, gosh, 11,362 voters became unaffiliated or were registered unaffiliated in that 1 month period. So, of course, that's probably most of the Democrats who left their party, but also new people moving to Colorado, people just newly registered. And of course, that's the default in Colorado, as you know. If you just register to vote and don't choose a party where you're automatically registered, they just put you in unaffiliated. So with open primaries, there's a lot of reasons why people might just choose to be unaffiliated anyway. But I thought this was very interesting. Definitely a good sign, if you will, for people who want to see Republicans gain some political power down in Denver. So let's jump to the Magellan poll. And this is where I want to spend some of the time of the video here, really going through this. So they do this frequently. Magellan Strategies, we'll talk a little bit about how they're doing this, but this is from August 2025. This is what all those articles mostly are referencing, besides what we've already talked about. So let's read this top part. Magellan Strategies is pleased to present the findings of a voter opinion survey of 1,136 Colorado registered voters. It doesn't seem like quite a bit, so consider that. The interviews were conducted from July 30th to August 12th, 2025. The statewide results for each question have a margin of error of 2.91%. We'll say 3%, at the 95% confidence interval. The survey data were weighted to be representative of the Colorado registered voter population demographics. This survey was designed and paid for by Magellan Strategies, and they go on from there. So interesting stuff here. We're going to skip really a lot of the stuff to deal with nationwide issues. Of course, like I said, links will be at freestatecolorado.com if you want to go in and dig in. But I really want to focus just on Colorado and some of the Colorado politicians that we have. We'll talk about a couple things. The U.S. economy as a whole, though, 72% say it's fair and poor. Only 26% say excellent and good. We'll see that mirrored here in the Colorado question. But yeah, the economy is not doing great for a lot of people. And I think any candidates for office, anybody who wants to have a positive effect on policy change here in Colorado, needs to really recognize how people are struggling in our state and the affordability crisis that most people are facing. People think the economy is going to get worse too at a 57%. They might not be wrong there. It's easy to think that way. I thought this one was interesting here. Which of the following statements best describes you and your family's financial situation when it comes to the cost of living? For women, that's 70%. 70% say causing some stress, causing some serious stress. Wow. For men, it's a little bit less than that, but nonetheless, overwhelming majority of people here in Colorado are stressed out about their financial situation. And that is key because we see candidates both on the left, mostly on the left, really trying to solve this problem by raising taxes, stealing more of our money, more regulations on businesses, attacking the evil billionaires, as they call it. Absolutely ridiculous stuff that's going to make us worse off, of course, if we understand how markets actually work. But nonetheless, we see these far left candidates possibly gaining ground in Colorado because they're trying to answer this question. They're trying to address the number one issue that's on people's mind, which is just the financial situation people find themselves in. So that's important. I think that's really important to bring up. I'm going to skip the Donald Trump's job approval rating. You can read that yourself. I'm not too concerned about that or the big beautiful bill for this video. The federal department cuts and job layoffs, tariff policies, we're skipping all of that. Supreme Court, go and skip. ICE, we'll go ahead and skip that. Now, this is interesting too. So you'll notice that the opinions on the Republican Party are pretty much identical to the opinions on the Democratic Party, which does show something that's in play, right? We kind of can gather that from the voter registration data that people aren't maybe excited about the Republican Party, but they're definitely not happy with the Democratic Party. So this is, do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of the Republican Party? 68% are in that unfavorable category, 30% on the favorable side. Not shocking, right? And then on the Democratic side, it's basically the exact same thing, which is very interesting. It shows that there's kind of this distrust of both parties. And I think really it's up to the candidates and the candidate campaigns to really make themselves known and make themselves kind of show what they're offering to the people, how they're going to help them with their financial situation. That's more important than the political party. It's always the case. Candidates are more important than what they're affiliated with, but even more so maybe now. So, a very interesting notice. He's 68% unfavorable for the Democratic Party, only 30% favorable. So, very interesting stuff there. They talk a little bit about Congress. Do you think this is very interesting about third party? That 58% say they would consider voting for an independent or third party candidate for Congress. That's just what they say, but it doesn't always bear out that way. We'll skip the Ukraine question, but let's talk a little bit about the Colorado economy question. We already kind of saw this, but nonetheless, I mean, look at this. Poor, 23% rate the status of the Colorado economy as poor. 43% is fair. Only 28% say good, and only 2% say excellent. Oh my gosh. Only 30% say excellent and good. 66% say fair and poor. Wow. So, folks, that is the number one issue is the economy and the Democratic policies in our state legislature, of course, and the city of Denver attacking business owners, attacking employers, making it impossible for small businesses to operate in our state. Bad news for sure. They break it down here by congressional district, if you're interested in that. And then how does the future look? Most people probably say it's going to get worse, 54%. Like the little bit of optimism that some people have, but most people. Now, this is interesting, right? Because we've had the Colorado Democrats in charge, for lack of a better word, at least in control of our political system here for many years now. And, they're pretty much responsible for the policies that have done exactly what we've been talking about throughout this whole video. So do you think Colorado is headed in the right direction, or do you feel it is off? It is off on the wrong track. 53% say it's the wrong track, 40% say it's on the right track. Wow. And I mean, we see it. We see it every day, right? We see it when can't afford to buy a house, when our grocery bill is through the roof. We can't even get plastic bags for free at the store anymore. When employers just decide to leave the state because it's impossible for them to operate here, when good paying jobs disappear, it's pretty obvious that we are on the wrong track that way. High cost of living and housing affordability is one of the main reasons there. Homelessness and public safety issues. Oh my gosh, yes. Crime. I mean, go down to Denver. If you follow Do Better Denver on X, oh my gosh, the problem there. Poor political leadership and governance. Overly progressive or liberal policies, infrastructure and growth management. Interesting stuff there. Now we're going to look at some of the Colorado elected official and organization job approval ratings. So this is a lot of what those Denver Post articles were talking about. Let's take a look here. Do you approve or disapprove of the job the following Colorado individuals and organizations are doing? Your local city or town government is the highest, which is interesting. And, 46%, 38% disapprove. But as you get further away from your own house, as you get further away up and up, it goes down and down. Your county government, only 40%, 44%. Governor Jared Polis at 41%. And look at his negatives there. Oh my gosh, 52% disapprove. Very few people have no opinion stance on Jared Polis. It's wild to see more than half of people have a negative opinion of him. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see it, honestly, because his policies have been a disaster. The Colorado State Legislature, 45% negative. 39% positive. And of course, the Democrats have a strong majority in both chambers. Senator Michael Bennet, oh gosh, yeah, 44% negative. Hickenlooper, only 49% negative. Jeez, Hickenlooper's up for reelection this year. And as a lot of the progressives are talking about on social media, he is vulnerable to a primary opponent. And gosh, we do not want that to be anybody who's further to the left than Hickenlooper. That could be an absolute disaster. Governor Jared Polis, there they are. There's the breakdown there, which is pretty interesting. And it's interesting to see men have a 60% disapprove, or 44% of women have. So it's very interesting to see kind of that split between the genders. The ages are relatively consistent. It is interesting to see that 45 to 64 have a more negative impression of Jared Polis than the younger people and older people than them. Very interesting. I have to wonder if social media has something to do with that. And then kind of break down there. Of course, Republicans, unaffiliateds have a 50% that disapprove. Wow, interesting stuff for sure. Um, Senator Michael Bennet, not much better, of course. Senator John Hickenlooper, yeah, people do not like him. Very interesting stuff. Now, this is interesting too. Colorado governor generic ballot test. So, if the election for governor were being held today, would you vote for a Republican candidate or a Democratic candidate? Only 38% say Republican, 50% say Democrat. So, we see that the Democrats still have a little bit of a stronger push there. It's going to depend a lot on the candidates, right? That's ultimately what it comes down to, as I've been saying. 12% undecided, though. 12% undecided. I mean, if they go with the Republican side, which hard to think all of them would, but nonetheless, they get those. I mean, it could be a 50-50 split, which is pretty interesting. Interesting, too, to see that men support Republicans a little bit more than women, and that actually older people support Republicans, and by older I mean 45 and up, more so than at least the 45 to 64 bracket. 65 plus is pretty even. 18 to 44, gosh, it's still on the Democratic side. It's a little disappointing. And then looking at the other data there, pretty interesting stuff for sure. Tabor, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. Now, you got to learn more about the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights if you don't know about it. It is one of the most important things we have in Colorado to keep our taxes low. If we didn't have Tabor, our economy would be in an absolute disaster. I personally believe we'd have way more homelessness, way more crime, way more issues because people would be even worse off without Tabor. But this does make me excited here, does make me optimistic here. So, people who are familiar with it, they're, 2/3 are pretty familiar with Tabor. And then the favorability rating, 45% have a favorable opinion. Only 22% have an unfavorable. So, I mean, Tabor, 2-to-1 margin, has a higher favorability rating than unfavorable, and that is awesome. 33% have the no opinion. Of course, that's the battleground, right? You see some of these far left groups out there trying to persuade voters to oppose Tabor, but it's the job of people who understand the benefits that Tabor provides to really move them into that favorable position here. But we have less, it's easier to do that because, Tabor does a great job. And that's very interesting to see the breakdown there, see how it all works. Um, Fascinating stuff for sure. And then wolf reintroduction, it's pretty interesting. Won't talk too much about it, but just know that 53% of the population does support it. Of course, you got to think of who's on the front range versus who's in the mountains, who's actually dealing with this issue. The rural Coloradans, of course, usually get the short end of the stick with things like this because the Denver metro area just has way more people. Then, at the end of this, they kind of break down the survey demographics. So interesting stuff, people. Just wanted to share this with you. There's important lessons to be learned here. There's important talking points. And of course, links at freestatecolorado.com if you want to dig in any deeper. But I just saw this article here and it relates so much to what we've been talking about today. I just have to share it here. This is from October 8th, 2025, from Fox 31, KDVR.com. Coloradans carry the most debt of any state in the nation. Gosh, that is not good. That is a bad sign of the sorry state we're in, and really explains this financial stress that people are experiencing in our state. It's not good, folks. Colorado is number one with $90,000 for $90,540 of average personal debt. Now, of course, a lot of that's probably mortgages. A lot of that could be, a variety of different things there. I didn't dig in to see how they break it down. You can definitely do that if you'd like. But to think that, look at these other states where there's so many people struggling. California, Washington, of course, the high cost of living in Hawaii. Utah has some troubles. Maryland, Massachusetts. I mean, these places, to see Coloradans with so much personal debt, not good stuff. Not a good sign of the times. People are relying on maybe their credit cards more than they should. People are taking out debt just to get by. That's a real possibility. But it shows that this is really the fundamental issue that anybody who's trying to get votes in 2026 will have to address. Address it, have a good plan, have a good understanding, and explain how you're going to help people's financial situation. It's ultimately what it comes down to. And I really hope that we have some good, strong pro liberty candidates who do that better than some far left candidates who are going to promise the world and end up bankrupting us even further. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you tuning in. We'll talk to you here soon. Take care.